and welcome to North Shields Baptist Church. It's lovely to welcome you here this afternoon. We are thrilled this afternoon to have Stuart Barlow, who's a local architect and expert on John Dobson, giving us a talk about John Dobson, who not only designed this beautiful church, but also designed a number of buildings around North Shields and the North East. So I do hope you enjoy the talk. Some of you will have already seen we've got a number of different artefacts that are out on show for you to have a look at, and there are some books there that you can purchase about the local area as well. Afterwards, there is a chance to have a cup of tea and cake in the back as well if you want to come and join us for that. We'll just continue in the round. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Karen. Is that okay? Can everybody hear okay? Well, thank you for that introduction, Karen. I'm actually a retired architect. I've been for a number of years now. I'm not from around here originally, as you might tell from my accent. But I came to know John Dobson, especially when we moved back up here about 8 years ago. And I must admit, it's actually quite a privilege, I think, to do this talk actually in the building that John Dobson designed, here in the Baptist Church in North Shields on Howard Street. I'm going to talk to you about the church, but also I want to show you some other Dobson's buildings. And some of them you don't even have to go very far to see, just a short walk outside. And then some of his other work in the area as well. Now, John Dobson actually designed this church, the Baptist Church, when he was in his 50s, at the height of his reputation. After a successful career, he'd been practicing for about 30 years when he designed the church. And during the previous 2 decades, he'd actually been working with Richard Granger, changing the face of Newcastle. A partnership actually started, first of all, in this. Dobson designed the elevations for the Eldon Square Grand Town development that Richard Granger did, which you see up on the top left there. But I think the culmination of this partnership surely must have been the work he did down Grey Street, which I've shown down here on the bottom left. Dobson was responsible for a range of buildings that extends from the Theatre Royal almost right down to Mosley Street. It was an architectural historian called Nicholas Chadstock actually said that Grey Street was actually the best of John Dobson's city streets, and it's one of the best streets in England, which I certainly think it is. Now, Dobson also designed many country houses during the previous time before he did the Baptist Church, one of which on the bottom right there is Dobson Hall, one of his early examples. And he also designed churches for many different denominations over his career. I've just got an example up at St. Thomas the Martyr and Barrows Bridge in Newcastle. So, Dobson designed this church in 1846 for the North Shields Baptist congregation. Now, they've been active in North Shields since the end of the 18th century, but by 1804 they purchased a hall on Stevenson Street and then raised the funds to buy the site on Howard Street on which this church is built. But I'm sure there's people here today probably know a lot more about the history of the church than I do. The church was actually built at a period when Howard Street was actually being completed as a proper street. It had been originally laid out about 20 or 30 years before by Alexander Crichton and Benjamin Tyzek, after John Wright had actually bought 50 acres of land from the 5th Earl of Carlisle, who was Frederick Howard, hence the name of the street. And much of central North Shields was actually built on that land. And what Dobson actually created when he built the church, I think is quite a bold buttress. You can see here, it's a bold buttress facade in stone. But also in quite a restrained way. And it's what I would call a neo-Norman style. Now, I hope I don't use too. I'm going to use architectural terms, but I'm going to try and explain them. My wife tells me off when I use too many architectural terms. What do I mean by neo-Norman? Well, if you go outside and you look at the windows, and you see the windows have got these stepped semicircular arches springing off these simple columns. And same with the doorway, entrance doorway. This is the type of architecture that was used in churches at the time of the Norman period of history. And that was before Gothic architecture developed. So that's why I get the feel it's a neo-Norman. Quite simple, but quite beautiful. And also interesting, actually, the rear of this church is still also in stone, as you can see in the picture on the right there. Which is interesting because historically, stone-faced buildings quite often have a cheaper wall to the rear. You know, no matter who's been building them. And normally, quite often people see buildings have got stone fronts or big back walls. But if you go to Newcastle, you get quite a few examples of houses in this period. Actually, houses are faced in brickwork and have rear walls and stone woodwork. If you go to the Summerhill Square, the houses there they have stone rear walls. They were obviously cheaper at the time. And Dobson, if you go into the interior of the church, I mean, you can look around. We just look around at the interior. Actually designed. He actually designed the interior, which it's a plain interior, but it's a really lofty interior. Which had the galleries you can see on three sides, accommodated I think 700 people originally. And although the original pews have been towed, I've had a conversation with the Reverend Edwards over 2 years ago, I think it was. The original pews, I understand, were actually removed in the start of the 20th century because they had woodwork. But of course, since then, the pews downstairs have been renewed again. Although, if you go upstairs, as you probably know, there are pews upstairs that give you the indication of what it was like. And Dobson also provided, because the facility for the immersion of adults, which is obviously a central tenet of the Baptist faith, which is still here and underneath the dais, I understand. But when I say it's a plain church inside, I don't mean it in a bad way, because I think what Dobson does is actually lets the proportions of the space work rather than actually the decoration overpower it. Although, as you can see, if you look around, you can see decorative elements. You will see, I've shown a picture there at the top right of the capitals on top of the circular columns, a composite classical capital. And so more simple capitals here. So he uses decoration but in a fairly restrained way. And one thing I did find when I was looking at the church, I found interesting, that even as soon as it was built, in fact the year it was built, it was used by the community for non-church events. And I know this is something the church still to this day. And the gentleman I've shown on the bottom right there is Frederick Douglass, the American abolitionist, ex-slave, he was an escaped slave, came to North Shields and spoke in this church about slavery. Well, I started my talk about the Dobson. I started with the church, because obviously this is where we are. It wasn't the first building Dobson by any means had done in North Shields. And why was this? Well, I don't know if you know, but there we go, sorry. John Dobson had a particular affinity for North Shields, and that was because he was actually born here. He was born here on the 9th of December 1787 to John and Margaret Dobson at the home in Churton, which was the Pineapple Inn, which is now the Pineapple Inn. Dobson's father was actually a market gardener, selling what was described as great quantities of produce to the town and shipping of raw shears. He was also a landscape gardener, who from time to time laid out ornamental gardens, and owned what an early 19th century publisher described as beautiful and extensive fruit gardens, which made Churton a place of fashionable resort during the summer months, with pleasant walks and convenient seats and arbours for parties of pleasure. They can also realise that now, but that was Churton in the beginning, at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. But young John Dobson, by the age of 6, he was a cheeky and idle, mischievous lad. He was going round drawing chalk sketches on the gates and the shutters of his neighbours in the village of Churton. He particularly liked, apparently, the gates of the coach house at the Churton House, which I've shown here. Luckily, the local schoolmaster, Mr. Lawson, who was actually partly a good artist himself, took him in hand. He gave him drawing implements and gave him paper and encouraged him to draw on paper. And this was the end of his alfresco activities. Now, Dobson's drawing capability became quite famous later, and by the age of 11 or 12, he was actually employed by a local damask weaver from Preston Village, John McGlashan, to draw designs for him. He was also employed by an North butcher called Ratcliffe to do drawings of the fat oxen's head he was trying to sell, and he was paid a shilling a drawing. It seems Dobson's father initially thought young John would follow him into the market garden business, but he eventually realised his son's artistic ability, his talent, his ambition, and must have had sufficient money to actually buy him an apprenticeship with a Newcastle architect. So, in 1802, at the age of 15, John Dobson became an apprentice in the office of David Stevenson in Newcastle. Now, Stevenson was probably the only professional architect in Newcastle at that time, in the North East probably. He was known as the architect to the Duke of Northumberland. Now, you can still see a number of Stevenson's buildings about in Newcastle. I've got here an image of, on the left side is All Saints Church in Newcastle, which is a David Stevenson building. And on the right is the facade of the old Northumberland Arms down on Newfield, which was part of the Stevenson development. Some people, I'm told, remember it as the jungle. Now, also, Dobson, while he was at Stevenson's office, he also took additional tuition outside the office. He was given lessons in watercolours of perspective with an Italian artist called Boniface Muss, and he had lessons from the County of Northumberland bridge surveyor, Mr. Hall, before completing his apprenticeship in 1809. But there wasn't actually enough work for John Dobson to set himself up as an architect at that time in Newcastle. So he spent here what he actually told himself, he travelling and sketching and studying the higher branches of architecture to acquire more skills and knowledge. He spent a gap year down in London. And after the year, he came back. After a year, he was studying watercolour painting techniques in London with the master watercolours at the time, John Varley. He returned and did this perspective here for David Stevenson of the New Quay development. And this is how they thought the New Quay was going to look. Unfortunately, it was never quite built like this. You can see in the middle, this building was built, but since it's been knocked down and replaced in the 1980s, early 90s, by the housing that's there at the moment, that building was never built. That was always a vacant site, and then up until the Sailors' Home went on there in the 1850s. And these two rather grand warehouses on the front of the site were never quite built like that. Apparently, they had trouble. These letters in the Duke of Northumberland's archive from the builders from Stevenson saying that they were losing the timber piles. And in fact, if you see the old photographs, there's an old photograph on Facebook recently, the buildings actually were built about half the size of what Dobson did. So anyway, he'd returned from London, and at the age of 23, he sets himself up as an architect in Dobson. First at his parents' home in Churton, before moving to Newcastle 2 years later in 1812. And after completing the first building, his first building in his professional life, which was actually the Jubilee School on the City Road in Newcastle, John Dobson designed his first building in North Shields, which you can actually see by just walking down the street a little. This was the meeting house for the Scottish Presbyterian Church, built in 1811. And Dobson designed it in what was then fashionable called the Greek Revival style. He'd done the same when he did the Jubilee School. What I mean by that, the style used forms and features based on ancient Greek temples, in essence. But what we have here is actually quite a simplified version of the Greek temple frontage. And he's using, you can just see them there, these are actually fluted Doric plasters. The plasters are a Latin representation of a column, which are Grecian. And he also uses Grecian motifs in the face. These little grooved panels are called triglets, which you get them on Grecian temples. And my beautiful assistant is showing on that one as well. The design actually looks like it's meant to fit into a street, in the same way he designed the Baptist church here, faced onto the street. But in fact, you can see from this extract of the 1827 Rooks map that the meeting house actually stood, that's the meeting house there, stood in splendid isolation. And that was 16 years after it was built. And in fact, if you know what thing is the dance school now, by the side of the meeting house, which is in the Salvation Army, that was originally a church school and meeting hall. That wasn't built until 1843, about the same time as the rest of the street was being developed. And interestingly, you go around the back of the meeting house, the church, it's in stone, just as the Baptist church is. So, Dobson felt the rear church walls were economic. Interestingly, the Baptist church, the meeting house was always commonly known as the Scottish Church, and that was because the congregation had affiliated to the Church of Scotland. Although their congregation's presence in North Shields could be traced right back to 1662, just after the Civil War, when a vicar from Wooler came, who'd lost his job in Wooler, came down here. Now, interestingly, John Dobson was actually baptised at the Presbyterian Low Chapel in North Shields in 1787, which suggests his family were actually Presbyterians. I don't know whether it helped him to get the first job, but it may have done. He may have had contacts in the community. Now, the meeting house and the Baptist church aren't the only buildings you can see by walking up and down Howard Street that were done by John Dobson. There's a definite delay on that. I've got to point it over there. Sorry. It's bouncing off the walls. Back to you eventually. Right. John Dobson designed the Old Town Hall on Savile Street, which runs between the corner of Howard Street and Norfolk Street. But it was actually constructed in two phases. The first phase in 1844 had a courthouse and a police station, and that would be from about here. This was the first phase, the Howard Street end. The second phase, built a year later, extended down to the corner of Norfolk Street, and actually contained a savings bank and mechanics institute, Mechanics Library, museum and offices. And the building became the town hall for the borough of the newly formed borough of Tynemouth after its incorporation in 1849. Now, the design of is an example of what is described as Dobson's Tudor Gothic style. So it's based on buildings from the Tudor period. He uses these castellations on this section of the building down Savile Street on the roof. And then if you look at the windows at first floor, they've got the stone transoms and mullions, very like you see in a Tudor building, Tudor houses. And there's got this first and second floor oil window down here. As the building turns the corner, you see Dobson's using sort of Tudor-style shaped gables on the corner. Interestingly, this is a photograph from the 1880s. What you have there now are modern shop front windows, but in fact, the photograph, a bit clear on that one, if you can just see it, he's actually got stone mullions and transoms in those windows as well, so it's very much more keeping with the Tudor style. Now, it might not be clear now, but if you look at the 1861 map, Ordnance Survey map is here, there's the town hall. You can see there's actually a gap at the back of the town hall before the next building up the street. So when you go into the exchange now, you're walking through the building, which looks very much like the rest of the town hall. That's not a John Dobson building, that was actually built later. And in fact, the next building in that gap, after that gap here, is also a John Dobson building. It's the Wesleyan Chapel, or was the Wesleyan Chapel, which is right opposite the old church, the meeting house of Scots Church, and it was completed in 1857. It was actually built for a number of Methodist congregations who had come together in the early 1850s. And again, Dobson's, you can see, it's a very plain style. He resets the windows on the walls and to set back from these very plain pilasters supporting semicircular arches. Now, you will see some sources that say this building was designed by an architect called Benjamin Green. But there's a contemporary book written at the time by John Latimer, which records remarkable events of the area, printed in 1857. And it clearly records that the new chapel for the Wesleyan Reformers of North Shields in Howard Street was designed by Mr. Dobson of Newcastle and cost £2,500. You got a lot of money, you got a lot for your £2,500 in those days, I think. Later, the chapel actually became part of the town hall, and if you look at the windows above the doors, you will see that recorded. They're actually stained glass. The stained glass in those windows actually records the fact that they were both treasury offices. And now, if you go into the exchange, what was the old chapel is part of the theatre space. The final Dobson building you can see along High Street, you need to walk to the top of High Street and turn into Northumberland Square. This is St. Columba's United Reformed Church, whose congregation was actually founded by North and South Shields Scottish Presbyterians families back in 1779. And it was actually opened on the last day of 1857. Now, this time, Dobson's designed a church, which I think is a much grander church, a much ornate church. And it's in what is called the Neo-Renaissance style. And by that, he's basing it on the proportions and design features that you see in an Italian Renaissance palace. He uses this rusticated, deep-cut stone base with the windows recessed. And above there, you will see these columns. These are Tuscan columns with windows between. And that's what, in architecture terms, it's the principal level, the piano nobile is described as. And they support the entablature and the balustrading and the cornice is all supported by that. Now again, if you look at the buildings either side, they aren't by Dobson. They were not built until later, after the church was built in 1857. If you go inside this church, again you see it has a first floor gallery, accommodated about 600 people or so running up in the church. But a lot of the interior features actually in the United Reform are actually post-Dobson, which I thought was quite interesting. You've got the large organ that's in there. The timber font, which are the Mouseman, Thompson Mouseman timber work. And there's quite a nice number of stained glass windows. And this one here, there's two windows this is one of two windows designed by a gentleman called Leonard Charles Yvetts. Now Yvetts actually was the head of the design school at King's College, now Newcastle University, until about the early 1970s. And he has other windows by Yvetts in the time. If you go to Christ Church, the main east windows is an Yvetts window. And in the Siemens Chapel, there are also windows, the lifeboat windows are by Yvetts. And there's also in St George's in Cullercoats, there's 4 windows in the baptistry. Now we're fortunate, we've actually got 5 buildings in central North Shields, just up and down Howe Street, completely you can see. Unfortunately, we've lost 4 houses in North Shields that John Dobson designed, 4 large houses. The first was actually Waterville House, which he designed for George Rippon in 1815. Now, this plan shows you where it was. It was just off that's Coach Lane, and that is where the house was. You can see it's actually a square house with some range of outbuildings going this way in the large grounds. Now, the Rippons actually owned the North Shields Water Company, and this circular pond in the ground actually was used to feed water to the town, or some of it. Now the squarish building is designed with these outbuildings here. These outbuildings contain a laundry, with a workshop over it, and a brew house. On the grounds contain many fineries, conservatories, and even statues. Now after George Rippon and his wife died, his wife died in 1873. The garden was actually sold. The garden was actually sold off to accommodate the expansion of North Shields, and the house itself was incorporated to Stanley Street West and divided into 2 dwellings. And this house here is the old Waterville house, already divided up in this very grainy photograph. But if you look closely, you can actually see that it was a brick building. The stone features around the windows and on the corners point. Then in 1819 he designed 2 more houses in North Shields, John Dobson. The first one was West Churton House here, which was built that's the Pineapple Inn, so it was just northwest of the Pineapple Inn. Again, a large house and big gardens, and actually described as a time as a plain and commodious building of brick, which sounds very similar to what he built at Waterville House. It was built by Michael Dobson, who was part owner of the Bells Robson & Co., who operated the Wallsend and Durban main pits. It was demolished in 1937, but now lies under the site of the Norham High School. And then this other house Dobson designed that year was Preston Villa. Just off the Preston Road, and the edge of Preston Village up here, the site was there. Again, a big house in gardens. This was actually designed for John Fenwick, who lived there until his death in 1822. Then the house was occupied by various members of the Fenwick family until 1902. But just after the Second World War, 1946, the Air Training Corps took over the house. And these photographs here show the Spitfire that stood outside for many years. A lot of people remember seeing it out there. But also, this image also shows quite clearly that, again, it was a brick house, just like Waterville House, just like what partly West Churton House. The house was actually demolished in 1967 and made way development of houses now known as Woodlands. And all that remains, if you go Preston Road, you see a couple of gateposts there. This is the Woodlands housing development. That's all that remains of Preston House. Some 30 years later, Dobson designed another house in those shoes. He designed Houghton Lodge, which again was on, that's Coach Lane, just beyond the railway. That was the railway coming into North Shields at the time. And here's Houghton Lodge. And its gardens. Again, this was built by Thomas Hughes. It was a large house with substantial grounds. Got an auction notice in 1856. Here, you won't be able to see the writing. Hughes moved down south and he put the house up for auction. The notice tells us that the house contained a drawing room, a dining room, library, 9 bedrooms, and interestingly, obviously worth note, a hot and cold water bath, which must have been very trendy at the time, plus a kitchen, household bedrooms, and underground cellars. The gardens actually contain vineries, conservatories, horse and houses, along the coach house, stables, a harness room, and a dog kennel, cow buyers, and poultry houses. So it was obviously a very substantial house for a wealthy owner. Now sadly, Houghton Lodge suffered the same fate as Waterbuckles. Its gardens were swallowed up by the expanding North Shield from the 1870s onward. And later the house became part of St. Joseph's School, which is now St. Cuthbert's School. That's the house, that's Houghton Lodge there, and this is the main place, and that's the school just been built there. Now, and the only thing that now remains are these gateposts and wall. You go down Coach Lane, which is Houghton Lodge written on the stonework. But there might possibly be one more Dobson house in the area that's still standing. In the list of buildings attached to Dobson's obituary in the Newcastle Journal, there's a reference to a house, Prior Terrace, Mr. Lawton. In the 1861 census, we find a Benjamin Lawton living at the 7th house on Prior Terrace, as it was called then, with his wife, Mary, son and daughter, and 5 living in servants, which possibly makes this house on Prior Terrace a house that John Dobson designed. Interestingly, Benjamin Lawton was a contractor for public works, and this is probably how he knew John Dobson. Now, despite designing a lot of wonderful buildings, this working for Richard Granger built all these buildings in North Shields, Dobson always undertook throughout his career a lot of basic building and surveying work for his clients. I probably thought it was quite good money earning. And we have examples of this in North Shields. Tynemouth House of Correction, which is next to the Tynemouth Lodge Public Housing, was actually originally built in 1792 on the Tynemouth Road. But the County of Northumberland Justices of Peace actually placed a notice in the Newcastle Courant in 1835 where they invited tenders for building an addition to the House of Correction in Tynemouth based on Dobson's plans and specification. What we don't know is actually what these alterations were, because we don't have copies of those plans. Dobson also took surveying work for the Linskill Tynemouth Lodge estate. Now, the Tynemouth Lodge is outlined in red on this plan. This is the old Tynemouth. This is Tynemouth Road. That's Linskill Terrace, as you know it today. That's the old Tynemouth Lodge there. His first job for this estate was for Colonel William Limscombe in 1816, where he laid out housing plots on the estate for sale. Well, as you can see, this is an 1826 map. 10 years later, nothing had been built. And then some 45 years later, you can see on the 1860 Eldon survey plan, only a few houses had been built, still relatively unbuilt. Time Alpha Lloyd's is actually shown on the plan, and the factory has just been demolished. So in 1860, he actually was employed by the Colonel's son, Captain William Limscombe, to lay out the eastern portion of the estate, which is this end of the side. This is Washington Terrace, that would indicate a couple of houses there. So he did lay out plots there. And in fact, the notice for the auction of these, again in the Newcastle Courant, said that a great portion of this ground commands a fine sea view. Now, I don't know whether this is actually 19th century estate agent jargon, but I'm not entirely sure you could see the sea from those houses, and it reminds me of some sea view boarding houses where I used to go to as a child. Again, Dobson's layout doesn't appear to have been used. And I found notices 15 years later, they're still trying to sell off building plots. Now, I think it's important also to remember that while Dobson may have laid out streets for his clients like here, the houses that were actually finally built weren't actually designed by John Dobson. Because at the time, the small-scale nature of the building industry meant that a lot of speculative house building was much smaller. You didn't have house builders like we have today. They would do 3, 4, 5, 6 houses at a time. Although they may have actually said that the houses had to look a certain way on the sales documents. But I'm not saying any of the houses in the Washington Terrace area are John Dobson's. They wouldn't be. But in addition to the jobbing work, we do have more work by John Dobson in the area. In the early 1840s, he designed a base and plinth for Admiral Collingwood's monuments, which was paid for by public subscription. It was completed when Dobson placed the head of Collingwood onto the statue designed by John Graham in September 1845. A few years later, in 1849, he completed the monument we see today. By adding on these plinths for the cannons, which came from Collingwood's ship, the Royal Sovereign, which was a ship at Trafalgar. And in the year Dobson completed this church, he designed the breakwater at Cullicoats Haven. This was designed to replace the one that was 150 years old and in a dilapidated state. And the breakwater, although this isn't a straight photograph, the breakwater is still mainly there on the northern side of the haven. And then in the 1850s, Dobson restored the Percy Chantry, or chapel at time of Priory. Although it's known as the Percy Chantry, English heirs actually believe it was commissioned or sponsored by Prior John Morton in the late 15th century, because his initials appear twice, ILP, in the ceiling. Now, Dobson had done measured drawings of the priory in the earlier part of his career, and I'm sure that helped him to produce what's considered to be a scholarly reconstruction of the chantry. What he did, he restored the ceiling. A wonderful ceiling when you go in there with all these decorated roof bosses. He replaced or restored the tracery which had been missing in the circular window above the altar there, and the other windows were reglazed. And in fact, this window here, actually, they were sort of by William Hales of Newcastle, who also provided windows for Fuge's Cathedral Church, St Mary's in Newcastle, and Exon Hamlet. But one building we can't see, sadly, because it's been demolished, is the offices, Dobson's offices for the Tyne Improvement Commission at Northumberland Dock, which he designed at the end of the 1850s. Now, the office building has been described as a neoclassical design with actual stone. And this sort of rather grainy, I'm getting rainy by the minute, photograph in the sun, Jews Library is the dock office. But he also designed dockmasters, a deputy dockmaster's house, and a group of workers' cottages there. And this other photograph, again I found in from the library, shows what, because I think this may well be the office in the background. And I wonder whether they are the workers' cottages that Dobson designed. Because it would be nice to think they were, because I think these are the only workers' cottages he actually designed throughout his whole career. But then sometimes, even architects as good as John Dobson have jobs that just don't happen. And we have an example here. In 1839, Dobson produced a design to convert Tynemouth House, which is here, which is now part of the school, convert it into a new Grand Hotel and baths for Abraham Dobson. It was actually quite a grand concept. It apparently was going to include a commodore room, a museum, assembly room, billiard room, and seawater baths. They were going to pump the seawater from a place that wasn't polluted. So it must have been come a long way. But it never got off the drawing board. Dawson couldn't raise the capital for the job. So it never happened. And the final example I want to show Dobson work is a little further away, but still within the area. John Dobson also worked on one of the finest 18th century houses in the north of England, the John Vanbrugh Seton Delaval Hall. He worked on it after it was gutted by fire. Dobson was commissioned to carry out repairs to the hall in 1860. And if you go there, basically he repaired the roof, he re-roofed the hall. But he also put in these brick arch supports along John Dobson to stabilise the hall from falling in. And I think this is an example of actually clients recognising his technical skills. He was a very technical, adept architect was John Dobson. He wasn't just a good designer, he knew how to do things technically. But this wasn't the first time John Dobson had actually worked at Seton Delaval Hall. In 1814, while he was actually working at Gibbside House for Lord Strathmore, he was engaged by Sir Jacob Henry Hasley to work on Seton Delaval Hall. Now, Sir Jacob's problem was that Vanbrug's design had been marred actually by a later addition. This is the central Vanbrugh portion of the house here, which you see now. There's a sort of a grey area. There was actually, in 1770, suddenly they put a wing extending out from that central pavilion. And in fact, if you go to Seton Delaval now, you will see the sort of edge of that wing has got bits of broken off connections, and that was the old wing that had been put there. And what Dobson designed, it's a bit of a grainy because it's a small image which I've had to blow up. This is the wing that had been built in the 17th century. So John Dobson proposed to put on these octagonal towers here, which match the ones that Vanbrugh did, and also build a new west wing. And if this design had gone ahead, it would have created a whole southern facade extending 23 bays wide. Now, fortunately, or unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe, these proposals actually didn't survive the death of Sir Jacob's death in 1817, so they were never built. Over his career, John Dobson obviously was very respected. By the time this photograph was taken, around about 1850, He'd already been made a Fellow of the Institute of British Architects, which is now the Royal Institute of British Architects. And in 1859, Dobson was elected by his colleagues, and he's a architect of the North East, as the first president of the newly formed Northern Architectural Association. But tragedy also struck his life in life. After 30 years of marriage, he lost his wife, Isabella, who died in 1846, aged 52. Dobson was 59 years old. And then his younger son, Alexander, who had actually trained to be an architect, was killed by fallen debris in the Great Gateshead explosion of 1854. He was standing in the street watching it, apparently. Alexander was about to go on a Gothic study tour of Europe, and this is something his father had never managed to do. This meant that Dobson's eldest son, John Jr., actually had to give up his career as a mariner. He'd followed his maternal grandfather into the typical mariner to take over the administration of Dobson's office. And this was at a time when he'd just become part owner and captain of a ship, with host attendant for the Southern Trade. And then only a few years later, again, John Jr.'s only son, John, died in 1857. He was only 14 years old. And then in 1862, John Dobson himself suffered a stroke, from which he never really recovered. So, after a career lasting 50 years, over 50 years, John Dobson died at his home in New Bridge Street on the 8th of January 1865, he was 77. Dobson was actually buried in the presence of his older brother Alexander in Gentleman's Cemetery. It's a cemetery where he actually designed the gatehouses and the lodges himself 30 years previously. This is his grave. It's actually looks surprisingly simple when you see it in the sea of other Victorian funerary monuments in the area. But in fact, that gravestone there was only added at the start of the 20th century when his daughter Margaret died. This, and this image here, is the original grave marker. It's a simple cross, just got JD carved on it. Now, the esteem in which John Dobson is held, I think, is reflected in his obituary in the Newcastle Courant. It said that his name is indelibly associated with the history of modern Newcastle as designer of some of its chief architectural ornaments. The man who designed this church was involved in nearly 450 projects over his career. He worked repeatedly for the same clients. And as an architect, I can tell you that was no mean feat. It shows he did good work. He designed and altered and restored nearly 60 churches and chapels in his career. He designed prisons, reformatories, hospitals, schools, warehouses, docks, railway stations, the Great Central Station in Newcastle as well as this, town halls, monuments, and many, many great houses. Now, most of Dobson's work is in the North East and the Newcastle, but his work is spread all over the country. He even designed the castle in Hessen, Germany. Unfortunately, the design was altered when it was built, so his design was never built. And I think it's sad, really, that the son of North Shields, the architect of this church, is actually remembered in Newcastle by a street of nondescript buildings, a car park, and an elevated tower block. As one of his biographers, Lyle Wilkes, quite rightly said, I think, he described it as a negation of every value to which he, Dobson, devoted his life. As Wilkes said, he deserved better than that. At least he's now recognised in North Shield by a blue plaque on the pineapple inn. And hopefully, as you walk around North Shield, you'll recognise some more of his buildings and maybe where his buildings were as you walk around North Shields in Tamworth. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Well, if you look through his work, he designed numerous styles. But to start with, he was very much, I thought, he designed in the classical style. I think that's where Stevenson's work is all very classically inspired. But it was a period where he started sort of in the Georgian period, if you like, where this classical architecture was dominant. And then we came to a period where Gothic architecture became more, as a style, was revived within architecture. Although it never went away as many people realised. It was always still there in the background. It wasn't purely everything classical. And he seemed to pick and choose. I mean, his daughter Margaret, who wrote a biography of him, or a monograph on Dobson, sort of claims he was a great Gothic revivalist, promoter. I don't think he was actually that, because his Gothic's not as strong as somebody like Puget. If you look at the work of Puget, if you go to St Mary's, St Mary's Church in Newcastle, which is designed by Puget, some of the detail is much more ornate, Gothic-y. Than what Dobson's Gothic architecture is. I mean, his Gothic is very much a Tudor thing. He did a number of other country houses which are very Tudorish in their style. And I think he picked and chose styles to suit maybe his clients and what his clients wanted. I think, churches for, like the Baptist Church, like the Wesleyan chapel, they probably wanted something that was plain. And, so I think he would design like that. So I think he would actually design and think. I think he grew up in a time where classical architect or neoclassical style architecture based on the Roman examples, semicircular arches, columns, pilasters, and those kind of details. That's what he was trained in, I think. Because that's what if you look at Stevenson's work, a lot of it is like that. And that was what was sort of like the most popular architecture. But he evolved into do other styles. And because it never really gone away to some extent. But I think because there's so many classical themes he would have seen. I mean, in fact, if you go down to the bottom of High Street, I mean, of course, what is now the Registry Office, people know as the Stagline, was actually originally the Time Out and Literary and Philosophical Society Library. And that was built at the beginning when Dobson was being apprenticed, so you would have seen that in a very classical style. I don't know if does that answer? Well, I think the old copied and developed it. It wasn't a great. When the Gothic revival started, there were certain architects like Puget who really pushed it and wrote about it and promoted it as a sort of almost unethical lines. This is good and that's bad, as it were. He was never like that. I think Dobson would design what his clients wanted. But he was very good at doing it. The house, very well detailed, very well put together. And even to the extent, I suppose it's faint praise, he actually, at Wallington Hall, where the sort of centre of Wallington Hall, the evidence Wallington Hall, Dobson actually moved that over and designed it. But the Trevelyan's wife, who was great friends with John Ruskin, and they had to pass all the plans past John Ruskin before they were allowed to go. And the only one thing he asked to change was the balustrade at the first floor. He wanted a particular balustrade that was sort of Venetian out of his Boxlands in Venice. And that's the only thing they changed. So he was respected by even by architectural critics of the period. I don't know if that helps. Well, I I have no real evidence to say that that's a baby, but he seemed to do so many different styles of babies. In that sense, I think it's what he must have had conversations. What the clients want. I mean, all architects at the end, you have to ask your client what they want. And it's how you interpret them. How you figure out for them. Sad thing is, there probably isn't a great deal of, there's not, when I started doing the research, it's like, these drawings seem to have disappeared. There's no great archive. I mean, you can see the RIB and some of his drawings on. But if you got to Schwab in Newcastle, if you get in, they don't have a lot. I thought there'd be something like that, but not a lot at all. Which is sad, because he was such a... He was influential in the sense that he was always there and he produced a lot of stuff for people. Well, I hope it's allowed you to sort of at least see that, you walk round, you will now know that that's actually like John Dobson. He is a sort of Newcastle, of North Shields, and that's the one thing until I actually, I'd always known about, I did even as a student when I first came up to Newcastle this summer, I sort of knew about John Dobson as an architect, but I didn't realise he was, I didn't realise he was born in North Shields. And what I didn't realise when I came back, this was 8 years ago, how much work he'd actually done in this area. And that was quite an eye-opener.
Yes, I'd like to express my thanks to Stuart there. That was absolutely fascinating. Particularly, I had no idea how many of the churches in this street were also Dobson buildings, and because I'm from Churton as well, I was intrigued with all the buildings that were in Churton that have now gone. But thank you very much for that. That was enlightening. Thank you.